Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to JavaScript Girl in a .NET World. My name is Alyssa Nicoll, and joining me today, I have not one amazing persons, but two amazing persons. Or maybe
Two
three.
amazing.
I don't know if we're counting Eric, but we'll get to that. So so welcome Layla on this side. Hi.
Hi.
And also Jim. Ooh, yeah, that one's much easier.
Hello.
So last week, Layla was on the show with me, and Jim was giving us all these like incredible tidbits in chat, and we were like, maybe he should come on IRL in person and give us a bit of a history.
It rarely happens. I never appear on camera.
I was gonna say, like, Layla, do you make him stream with you? What?
Well, we used to stream together, and this was why we didn't, because I don't know why there was something happening downstairs. I just heard a whole load of noise. I don't know what's going on. But yeah, we used to stream. We used to have a show together last year, but it was just, it was hard work. We did like a news show, and it was a lot of effort.
Was it like code news?
Yeah, like tech news. Yeah.
I don't know how other folks find it, but I'm easily distracted. I guess I'm another one of this ADHD crowd. But if you're trying to concentrate on doing your work, trying to do a stream, and you've got dogs fighting and barking underneath your desk, I couldn't do it. So it's no, I just parked it for a little bit. So.
Oh, no, that totally makes sense. And Layla likes to add in the extra complexity of being in a standing chair that rocks. So
I know. Tell me
I'm
about
on it.
Whee! Are you actually on it right now?
Yeah. And the thing is, I can stretch on it. So before we went live, before you came on, I was like, stretching right over it. I can rock.
I cannot believe, like, I would be on my face. Absolutely impressed. Hey, Saul, how are ya? Hi.
I guess something else we should explain for your viewers is that Layla and I are in the same house. She's in an office to me that way, and I'm kind of behind Layla. You wouldn't know that, but just if we start sort of kind of referring to each other in very close terms, that's why.
And apparently there's a party downstairs that you're not invited to.
I'm never invited to any of the parties.
No. So Jim has his door shut so that we can't hear each other like in real life. And yeah, I just as we went live, I don't know what's going on downstairs. I don't know if the letterbox went or if there's a burglar or if, I don't know. Like,
who knows? I can't hear. Got headphones on.
Yeah. Well, if someone comes in and we see someone from behind, I will warn both of you. Hey.
Okay, good.
You're not alone. Hey, from Portugal. Good to see you. Welcome. We've got kind of a packed show today. I'm really excited about. We're going to start off with Silicon. Do I call you Silicon or Jim? Or
you can call me Jim or Silicon, whatever flows off the tongue.
I never know. Hey, good to see you in the chat. So Jim is going to be giving us a history of .NET, which I'm super pumped for. And I think just based on how you've explained things in the past in the comments, I feel like we're going to vibe as far as like your teaching style, because so no, we will never name names in such a context, but some people try to teach me like, oh yeah, this is for this in .NET or in anything in code, and I'm like, none of that stuck. Like, it just all slid right off the brain. So I'm really excited because anytime you would jump in with comments, I was like, oh, that actually clarified everything. So I think this is going to be like a brilliant walkthrough. And
that's what you mean by my teaching style then? I wasn't sure, because sometimes it's just like grabbing people by the throat. Learn. Damn it.
No, that's definitely where I need to be at. Hi. Hello. Yeah, and if the dogs need to come on camera, no one's going to be upset about that.
Go on, Alyssa, go on.
No, you go. You got this.
I was going to say, you hear all these people who say they're polyglots. Are they being truthful? Yeah. Can you really be a proper polyglot programmer?
I mean, I've only heard of polyglot conferences. I didn't know people were claiming it as programmers. Isn't it just the same as saying like full stack, but like in the other direction?
I don't know. Like some people. So my friend Sarah, Geeky Girl Sarah, who does streams with her giant cats, and I mean her cats are like this big. She's a polyglot. developer, and she's like, oh yeah, she does Code Thesaurus, which is like a reference across different languages, and she can write in this one and this one and this one, and I'm just
that's
like,
really
maybe
cool.
her brain. I can only speak 2 languages at a time. Okay, so I used to be fluent in French, and then when I moved to Spain, I had to throw all the French out of my brain so I could learn Spanish, and that was it. There was no like English, Spanish, and French. I'm not
Yeah.
multilingual. I am purely bilingual. I can't be more than that, or else like I'll
And
throw
you're
English out.
although I really do think that programming languages count as languages, even though we don't speak them aloud to each other. So I
Do
think
you?
that kind of breaks down your bilingual thing, because I know you know at least one programming language.
That makes me feel a lot better about myself.
Multilingual for the win.
Jim, I saw on your screen because I can see your little screen share before I share it, that you have like this interface that looks like gray and Microsoft. Like my interface doesn't look like that.
Oh, yes.
Why,
Yes.
how, and what are all the questions? Yes.
I am ready to take those questions. I may not be able to answer them, but I think you may learn something.
Like your menu bar. Show it again. You had a little menu bar.
No. Contain yourself. It's all part of the process. We'll get there.
I want to see it.
You want to see it? All right. Okay. All right. Next one. That stuff, you mean?
That. Oh, is that not your computer? Oh, it's a slide.
That's part of the slides.
I thought that was your computer, and I was like, how did you get it to look like that? Mine doesn't look like that.
Well, if you think that's groovy, oh my God, this is going to be so much fun.
I like literally, if anyone in the chat knows how to get your PC to look like that, like, I don't know if there's like wrappers for themes or stuff. Like, I want that in my life. Right
I think
retro
you
style.
can. I think. Hi, Ed.
Hey.
Hello. Oh, by the way, Ed, you sent me some swag. I'm doing good.
Oh yeah, it looks amazing.
I got the swag. Thank you.
I love it. He's repping the Blazer side. I like it.
Yeah.
I need to watch the chat, don't I? It's on a
Also,
different screen. I'm not
Salt was
paying attention.
cracking me up. He said, I can't even JavaScript myself out of a paper bag. I feel the same way sometimes. Like, sometimes I feel like I've gone too far to the front end, but that's why I'm here. All right. I'm ready. I'm going to do it. I'm polyglotting all over the place.
Yeah.
Is that proper?
Please
give me a look if I say something inappropriate again. It's on you, Layla. You gotta.
So, Alyssa, how long have you been doing the C#.NET stuff for now at this point? Because this is still new for you, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it's all very new. So I've done a handful of streams where I was programming by myself, and I call it programming. It was really just me walking through tutorials. And so I have built like a to-do app in Blazor. I attempted to build one in WinUI. That went extremely poorly. Apparently it's not ready yet, for those of you who don't know. I was working on some WPF stuff for desktop, and then I did something before Blazor. But I'll have a lot of friends who are like, you need to go back to the basics. And I'm like, they're like, why did you jump off the deep end? I'm like, that's where it's
really walking before running, isn't it? I know.
Yeah. So that's really kind of just things I've dabbled with and looked at, maybe walked away slowly from.
So I guess we want to talk about this talk, right? So what made me think about this was, when you were on the stream the Layla last week, you did an expression. Sorry, let me back up. You were talking about VB.net. Do you remember that?
Yes. And how I see like all over the docs. Do you mean VB or do you mean C#? And that just makes me want to cry, because I was like, why? Well,
your expression was something a bit like this, wasn't it? I just thought, we could have a discussion here, and if we have like a little bit of backstory, I reckon things could make so much more sense for you. So here we go. Right then, shall we do some presentation stuff? So this is not comparable to Richard Campbell. So those of you who know Richard Campbell, he does a magnificent talk about the history of .NET. It's at least 2 hours long. What do you reckon, Layla? Is it about 2 hours?
Yeah.
Is it really? Is it seriously, like dead serious?
Seriously that long? He's written a book on it. So he came to the user group that I host, and he gave a sort of abridged version, and it was about 90 minutes. And he can do it quite short, but like it's epic. But he goes into all the people. I don't think the book is out yet. I think he wants to release it for the anniversary of .NET, which will be like in April or February.
It's imminent,
or
isn't it?
something. It's very soon, so he's working really hard to have it ready. But he goes into like all the people and everything because he knows everybody.
I was going to say, Rich is really connected, isn't he?
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, no hate, Ed, at all. I have a really hard time telling when people are being sarcastic or not. So I had to ask, like, if they seriously meant that, or if it was like a
no,
you know, like no, it was 20 minutes, but it felt like 2 hours. Like,
oh no, he's a very enigmatic, not enigmatic, charismatic speaker. So he's very engaging, and he's not like reading it off. It's his personal experience. He's such a bright, intelligent person. He holds it all in his head, and he's really knowledgeable, and so he's just like telling you almost like a fairy story as he tells it. So it's really interesting to listen to. And as Ed says, it's like 20 years of history, but he goes into like, oh yeah, now you're speaking to so-and-so, and they, you know, I said this wasn't a good idea, and you're like, oh my God, he knows everybody. But so when you're not going to do that one though, are you, Jim? You're just
I was going to say,
like,
we've set the expectations like really, really, really high. Can I just say, this talk is
some screenshots, isn't it? That about it?
Just a bit of talking, a bit of history. I don't know, maybe 20 minutes, and then I'll vamoose.
I'm just reading what Ed just said.
It's almost as long as the last week of JavaScript history. Yeah. Yeah. The jokes. He's got him.
Oh, go on and show us some Windows 95 then, Jim.
I know. President was saying that if he could use that theme, he would. I really want chat to tell me it's possible. I need to turn my windows back into that.
I feel like it is, but I've just not seen it. Anyway, chat, that's your assignment then for the next hour, to find out for us how it's possible or not. Right, Alyssa, we're going to go back to the year 1996.
Okay.
All right, and that's what this slide was all about. So on the screen here, there's two windows. One is this thing called Windows 95, and the other one's called Windows NT. Now, I don't know how old you are, but...
So I would have been 7 when this happened.
So
I think I was on a computer around this time. So the 95 one looks familiar.
I was going to say, so is this sort of loosely familiar, even if it's a bit of a distant, hazy memory, yeah?
Not NT, though. Definitely the left one. What is NT?
Ah, okay. Well, this is a bit of a tangent, but basically, cosmetically, they looked exactly the same. Windows 95, you could think of as being like your consumer version. It's the sort of thing that you and I would have at home, maybe in the small business. Windows NT was the thing that you would have for professional workstations and on the server. So to try and be brief, the idea is that it manages memory a bit differently, and it's much less likely to have a program bring the whole thing down. Whereas if you had a program crash on Windows 95, there's a very good chance the whole system would bomb, which is not a good thing if you're running a server.
Yeah. I just don't understand why people know this. Like, Salt is over here saying, yeah, it was like a server implementation. I'm like, why do you all know? Were you all just like really into servers back then? Like, what?
Oh yeah, I used to sort of study like this magazine, sort of Servers Weekly. It's just like the best thing ever, you know. It's called being old, Alyssa. You just sponge your stuff up long enough. And what I found is I remember stuff from this era, but if you ask me about modern stuff, I haven't got hope. So, but I do want to sort of talk about like the technology and anything like that. It's more just like the aesthetic, this look and feel. I kind of miss it because aren't those windows nice and clear and the buttons easy to see?
Grab
and
the edges, you know where the edges are.
I'm getting that theme. It's going to happen.
I think there is a theme. I have seen people who have this that like boasted about it on Twitter, so that's fine. You can have it, Alyssa.
You can make your bug eyes at me all you want, Layla, but it is a boast.
To my bug eyes.
When I said I wanted it, you were like.
So I'm setting sort of a theme here. This is what the world looked like back in that time.
All right. Okay.
All right. Let me go to the next slide. So. Professional software development was not a new thing. We'd all had computers for quite some time by that point. There were professional developers out there making applications, and what you see on the screen now, the sort of tools we would have been using back then in sort of like the mid to late 90s. So there's lots of different programs, but one of them was called Visual Basic. That's not visualbasic.net. And another one maybe that you'd have at home or the small business would be something like Microsoft Office Access. So can you see my mouse moving on your screen?
Yes.
Right, okay. So ignore all that bit there on the right, which says about Visual Basic, but see that bit there which says form? That word form is going to be becoming quite a recurring theme, and it's where we hear things like WinForm or WebForm. This is the history of all where these applications come from, right? So you kind of go, how would you have programmed against this? Well, that form there would be the thing that would be compiled and published to a user's computer, and that's what they would see. It wouldn't fill the whole screen necessarily. It would be just that form. And the way that you'd program it would be you'd pick up tools from the side there, drag and drop them across, maybe edit the text, edit the color, but it was very much fixed. You know, the actual layout.
You didn't have like a code behind file that you could go and modify in this version?
Kind of, that was there. So if you were to say, oh, I want to make a button do something, you'd have a double click event. So all this programming is very much like event-driven, event-orientated programming, which is good. It's really intuitive to use. I mean, you could pick it up and start making stuff really quickly, but it's maybe not ideal for making really big applications, because after a while it just gets like a spaghetti, a tangle of code and pages. You get the feel. Yeah. So
and you couldn't resize that, could you? It was a fixed
I don't think you could.
and things like that.
I mean, maybe chat can correct us.
The one when you were designing it, but when it was like in use by the user, you wouldn't have been able to resize it or anything. I don't think they were fixed sizes.
Oh, okay.
So I see Ed saying that he made VB6 apps. I did as well. That was my first introduction to this kind of programming, but it's so long ago, I can't really remember it much.
Did you like it? Was it fun?
Yeah. It's a good question, that, because it was intuitive. You could just get going. You could pick it up without necessarily knowing too much about what you're doing and say, hey, I've got a button there. And you kind of go, oh, I can get some code in there. And if you just understand the basics, like basic code, you get some quite good results pretty quickly. But I didn't do this for too long. I sort of moved over to web applications not long thereafter, and I kind of left all this kind of development behind me. So, but again, what I'm trying to do here in this talk is just establish this kind of idea of like, we used to develop with forms, and this is like a recurring theme which will come through as .NET evolves. And I think it's quite useful to understand when we've got this history of like, why do we have web forms? Why do we have WinForms? Why do we even have Visual Basic as a thing? It all starts to stem from this, right?
Are the it's different from like what we think of as like a form in HTML with inputs, though, right?
Yes.
Like, does this form have a different context? Like, it means modal or model?
What you see is what you get, quite literally.
Or
beneath the skin, yeah, I guess you did probably have, but not object orientated in the same way. You would have code which was associated with a button click.
Okay.
But it's not like an input form, Alyssa. The form it's like a form shape, I think. This is the thing that you're making. It's not a form in the same way like you would have a form on a website, which is to capture user input. So this is kind of like, here is a form. I don't know if it means like you'd use a form to make a mold. You'd form
like a sheet
something.
of paper.
Yeah. So that's what this is. It's not an user input. It could take user input, but that's not what they mean by a form. Yeah. Okay. So Smab, it says, think of a form as a window on the screen. So that would be it.
So Napalm was saying that he's worked on a few VB6 apps that are still in use. That's amazing to me.
Wow.
Like, that's amazing, right? Like that it still
works that is
in today's ecosystems. Like, talk about longevity.
I don't know if they're still supported though. Like,
you don't think so?
I don't know if Microsoft still supports it.
I wouldn't have thought so, but who knows?
Maybe
I'm really surprised to hear that. That's quite impressive, because this is 25-year-old technology
on VMs.
Let's think about that though. There's new developers coming out of university who weren't even born when this stuff was the current thing.
Don't say that. That makes me feel really old.
It's mind-blowing, isn't it? But as I said, I think it's useful to understand where Microsoft was coming from originally and why we have the things that we have now. So if you think in the late 90s, there was an army of developers all very much accustomed to using these forms and programming in Visual Basic. Microsoft has to look after them. So this is why when we come forward, we get the tools that we have now. This next slide. So about the same sort of time, so we'll talk about 95, Sun Microsystems produced this thing called Java. You may have heard of it. And that was a very, very popular object-oriented environment. It had its own language, it had its own runtimes. And the idea with Java was that you could have one language that ran on lots of different computers. It could run on Windows, it could run on sort of Unix systems of the time. And Microsoft said, that's a good idea, that is. I think we should do a Microsoft version of that. So they started in the 90s developing their own version of Java. And this is where the language for C# came from. And .NET with all its sort of runtime and sort of common language. And then they said, well, we want to introduce this new object-oriented language, but we need to be able to support all of the existing developers who are all accustomed to using Visual Basic. So how do they make that work, right? And this is why you get this idea of you can write programs using Visual Basic and C#. You could even have it in the same program if you wanted. So when you start to realize that's where they're coming from, all this starts to make a bit more sense, right?
I guess, but I'm confused because why would the docs differentiate if you can use them together? Like, because like a lot of times in the docs, they'll be like, do you want the C# version or the VB version? And is that just because?
That's because C# really established now, but back when this was a really new thing, there were no C# developers. The language hadn't even been made available. So what Microsoft wanted to be able to do is say, hey, you could ease yourself into .NET and still use the language that you're familiar with.
Okay.
And then bit by bit, developers could start to learn C#, which is what Microsoft really wanted us all to learn, and then ease the way across.
Who made Java, like, at that time?
Sun Microsystems.
Was it? Oh, okay. I thought it was
Sun Microsystems originally,
yeah.
And then it became Oracle. It was bought out by Oracle.
Oh, okay. And then were they a competitor with Microsoft, or?
Yeah.
It was a licensing issue, I think. So from what I remember being told was that they didn't, like, Oracle didn't want to license Java to .NET, to Microsoft, and .NET went, fine, we'll build our own, and so that's why Java and C# are quite similar. I think something like that. It definitely was some kind of licensing issue.
And Ed was saying that Java was supposed to be the language for the web, not JavaScript.
Yes.
What?
I know. Tangents, hey? But he's absolutely right, though, because originally what you could have was this thing called a Java applet. You probably have you heard of that?
I've heard of
one of those, yeah.
So the idea is that you would have this thing called a Java applet, which is written in Java, not JavaScript, running in your browser. And that's pretty powerful stuff. It's kind of a precursor to a modern SPA, I guess.
Is that supported still?
I don't know. I've not really played in Java ecosystem.
Well, you always used to get like CoffeeScript stuff on websites. Yeah. I don't know what CoffeeScript is. I just figured it was something to do with Java. I don't know.
Oh, did you know? I've used CoffeeScript before. It's like SAS for CSS. It's just a syntactical layering on top of JavaScript. But
there we go. I just thought it was something to do with Java because, you know, like coffee and Java.
Oh my God, I never thought about that because I used to love CoffeeScript. I worked at a company that used it all the time. And so I get made fun of often on my Angular podcast that I do because apparently CoffeeScript is not popular, but I loved it. All right. So it's like, some people stand by Silverlight. I stand by CoffeeScript. Okay, so this was the next step, the next phase.
Exactly that, yes. So that's Microsoft saying, we want our version of Java, we want control of this, and we're going to make this entire ecosystem for all of our existing developers to move across to, and everything's going to be hugs and love and niceness.
Oh, I'm getting I'm getting some love for CoffeeScript. Thank you, Indifferent Ghost.
All right, let's go to the next slide. So what I'm showing you now is, first of all, where am I over there, up the top there? .NET in its first instance appeared all the way back in 2002. So that's when it was first released. Obviously, they've been formulating it for a couple of years before then. But when it was actually released formally to the world, 2002. So, and I'm showing you .NET Winforms. And if you look at that, you kind of go, hang on a minute, that looks just like Visual Basic, right? You've still got like the form This is actually a web form by the looks of it. So you've still got a form, and you've still got like components that you can drag and drop across. It's it's all very, very familiar.
It looks virtually identical.
Yes, by design. So that's the idea. So I think I've bodged up my slides because I think I've got it. Yeah, I've got web forms twice. I know I said Winforms there, but I've mixed it up with web forms. But let's talk about web forms now. So the web is very different from making form-based Windows applications, because we're all accustomed to making websites now, aren't we? We have like a request comes in and you sort of give it some HTML. But back then, a lot of developers for Windows were not accustomed to making web applications either, right? So what Microsoft did was say, hey, we've got all these guys and girls making, well, actually back then it's probably more guys, because it's a bit imbalanced back at the beginning, wasn't it? But you had all these developers making these applications, and they're accustomed to using Visual Basic, and they're accustomed to dragging components onto a page. How are they supposed to start making web applications? So what they did, they invented this thing called web forms, which is a way of kind of butchering up how the web worked to make it familiar to these web developers. And the way they did it was really clever. Now, I don't know what to do, but I think we'll be here all night.
So you're saying it was like the next, it like came from Winforms?
Yes. Yeah, kind of.
Okay.
So
after, I guess?
SP Winforms was like a direct kind of lineage straight through from Visual Basic. And web forms is a way of making it all look and work the same, but using web technology. But to make it work like that, they had to do some real kind of magic behind the scenes, which kind of was not really in keeping with the way the web naturally works. But it was a good solution. It got all those developers making web applications pretty quickly.
A couple of people in the chat, like Napalm, saying, I miss doing that kind of UI dev. It was so simple. WPF and XAML is nowhere near that intuitive. And Fuel was saying the olden way was more productive. The old COBOL guys complain how much time we waste on rewriting the functionality. So that's funny. XAML is something I'm still trying to kind of get used to. And when I was doing WinUI, there was like a ton of people in chat who had never touched WinUI, but because they've had experience with some of these past technologies, they were like, try this, try that. So it was, it's funny to see how like it goes, like you were saying, how, this looks super familiar, doesn't it? Like at the evolution of things. So, but was the old, when they say they missed the old way of viewing, like, do you think they mean like GUI version or?
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much.
Because I thought you still have that in WPF, right? Like, no?
Yeah, it's still all there. You still have web forms. That's still a real thing today. Microsoft still supports it. I mean, this is one of the things with Microsoft is that, for better or worse, I mean, they get a lot of stick for how they go about doing things, but what they do is maintain their products for a long time. I mean, a really long time.
I know. I think that's part of the confusion coming into it is because there's almost like these trees of like this replace this, but some people still use three nodes back, and I think that's where it gets tricky, and I don't understand why they have such long support. Like coming from a JavaScript world, it seems ridiculous. Do you agree?
Yeah, no, completely.
Okay.
I think in the JavaScript world, we've probably had like 3 frameworks come out in time since we started this stream, right? So it's to have support for these applications is uncommon, but you have to think of the sort of clients that they've got. And a lot of these are big enterprises who they'll put a lot of time and money and investments into making these really big applications, and they can't just keep moving on to the next technology. Once they make
that's the thing I don't get is like right now we're talking about Angular and some of the upcoming changes, and they might be big changes, right? But there is an upgrade path that it's doable, right? No matter how large your app, this upgrade path is doable. Is that not something like whenever they're saying, oh yeah, we used to do Winforms and now we're offering this WPF thing? Was the upgrade path not on their minds? Did they not say, yeah, you're going to use this thing to migrate you to a WPF app? Or is it literally every time a rewrite? Like,
I think the succinct answer is no, there's not a direct upgrade. Of course you can do it. And the way you do it is sort of break off little chunks and move it bit by bit. But you think of your typical big enterprise, they're more interested in just delivering features. They've got a certain amount of money. they don't want to be spending a load of money, rewrite a whole maybe sort of 5-10 years worth of application. They just want you to put the next feature in. And these things just get bigger and bigger and more entrenched in their old technology, and they just get stuck in time.
Okay. No, that totally makes sense. Gotcha. Okay.
But this is where the history sort of comes in useful, because people like you will come into it and kind of go, why don't we just do it like the modern way? Why do we have to even worry about all these old ways of creating applications, creating web applications? And it's because of this history, it just drags along. And, having sort of, different people have different skill sets as well. Some developers are so used to sort of maybe working with the old technology. Not everyone wants to stay at the bleeding edge, or even sort of remotely the current edge. And so you get a whole tranche of developers that are just doing these older technologies.
Okay.
What did Hanselman call them, Layla?
Black matter developers. Dark
You heard
matter.
that? Dark matter developers. That's it.
Developers. That was it. Dark matter. Because they're all there. You just can't see them. And I've worked with a load of those. So when I worked for a communications company, this was like before Twilio, when I was a software engineer, and we had teams. We still had classic apps. We had some web forms apps. We had really old stuff, and like the guys I worked with, and I can say guys, there was only one other woman. She was a C++ developer. So everyone else in the whole engineering department, they were like, yeah, oh, that's interesting. I'm going to meetups and like, oh, there's this really cool thing. We can do this on different platforms. They're like, calm down, Layla, calm down. And I'm like, what is with all this .asp crap? Why have we still got classic? And they're like, calm down. You can upgrade it to an ASPX if you like, and these are different, like, so you've seen CSHTML. Well, before that, it was ASPX files, and like everything was in that. And I was like, can we upgrade this? No. And they weren't interested in learning things. They'd not watch videos. They'd never go to conferences because the company wouldn't pay for them to go. And they're all like family guys, so they didn't want to take their vacation times to go to a conference. They want to spend it with their family, so they never upgrade themselves. And so they're all there at the back of, like, they're the backbone of development, and that you just don't see them. You never hear from them. You never see them. You don't know how to connect with them, because they would never be coming to watch a show like this. They won't be on Twitter. So that's why I think the dark matter really describes this type of developer well, because you just don't know they're there, but they're there.
Did the article, or maybe a talk afterwards, give an estimate on like what percentage?
I think 99%. I think looking at that, what Sultan Burnham's shared, I see a 99.
I mean, that would be ridiculous, right? Like for that to be that high, you really like.
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a crazy idea, isn't it? I could believe it being maybe not
99%. The unseen 99%.
But I could believe it being really high.
Wow.
The thing is, in DevRel, you can almost live in a bubble, can't you? Because you're surrounded by people who it's their job to be like learning the new stuff, staying current.
It's their job to care. Yeah.
Exactly.
And so it's bizarre to me to hear that percentage.
And those people who are not directly in DevRel, they're going to be sort of the folks who are, really interested in learning more and staying current, because they're going to be, following DevRel type people. So again, they're not your normal type of developer. They're people that want to learn and sort of be at the forefront. And everyone else, 5:30, time to go home and sort of put the kids to bed or whatever it is they do. And it's you can quite easily imagine that people just don't stay current.
I'm bringing your slide back up, but I think it's fascinating, and I think Salt shared the link to it in the chat, so I'm definitely gonna, there it is. Check out the dark matter developers, the unseen 99. Yeah,
it's crazy, isn't it?
It is.
Right. There was another comment in there I thought was quite interesting. Ed, I think it's rolled on by there, but Ed was saying about JavaScript support, and I've not touched on this in this talk, but I think it's worth noting, is that back in this era, sort of late 90s, early 2000s, JavaScript was really slow and didn't have as many features, didn't have the compatibility. Oh, yes, slow. So we take it for granted just how snappy JavaScript is for like updating screen elements. Back then, it wasn't. It was terrible. It was not a reliable way of making applications. So your web applications would normally be doing round trips back to the server. If you make a change, it'd be posting back to the server, which would do something in server memory and then sort of put the results back to the screen. I don't think it was until about 2008. Chat, correct me if I'm wrong here, but about 2008, that kind of time, that Google started really rewriting the JavaScript engines. V8 engine rings a bell.
Yeah,
And then
that was what Exec was saying. Terribly slow prior to Google releasing V8.
It was in the chat. I beg your pardon. Gotcha.
So
yeah.
I wonder when that was. So people were like not wanting to use JavaScript then, I'm assuming, because of this?
It just wasn't fit for purpose for how we would use it now. But back then, the sort of thing you might do would be maybe you've got a form that you want to update a graphic to, like tick check mark or something like that. You do sort of low-hanging things with it, but equally so, you couldn't really guarantee that JavaScript would run all the browsers. So you'd end up with corporations making applications which would be for IE6, Internet Explorer 6, or no, come back a bit, it's older than that, IE 4 or not Firefox. What was the contemporary browser at the time?
Opera?
Possibly Opera.
Navigator?
Do you think Opera was that old?
I don't know.
I'm thinking
I just
Navigator.
fucking think- I think
I'm thinking
maybe
Netscape Navigator. So, yeah, but that's something that we just take for granted now, right? Having sort of JavaScript which runs on all the browsers and runs really performantly. That wasn't
Salt
a
said
thing back then.
Mosaic.
Possibly.
Yeah, Mosaic sounds familiar, but okay.
I mean, my first experience of the web was with a browser that didn't even have graphics. It was text only. And you kind of go, how on earth could that have worked?
I know. I'm thinking like, isn't that how the dark web works? Like,
I've seen the dark web on TV where it's like, in a darkened room with, ones and zeros whizzing across, and these people in hoodies and glasses, like like sunglasses, can just read these ones and zeros like fluently. So
okay,
that's it.
Exegete said that he uses text browsers every day. We're gonna need a link. All right, we need to know exactly what you're using on the daily because Alyssa wants to see. What were you saying, Jim?
I was racking my brain. I think that browser was called Lynx, Lynx.
That's what chat's saying. You need chat up on your screen.
All right, let me make it bigger. Let me make it bigger.
There you go. There you go. Oh, Fritz has come in and says web forms are the best.
But he might be being ironic, possibly.
I think Jeff is actually genuinely a fan of web forms.
Okay, so this is the thing that's really hard, like stepping into this world and all of these undercurrents and opinions. Like I had someone who loves me dearly, and they Slacked me privately, and they were like, "Why are you learning WPF?" And I was like, "Why am I upsetting so many people with my learning journey? Like so many people." Like, so
just do it. Just do it. That's crazy.
Oh, hey Fritzy. Hey everybody. I love the chat, by the way. You're all I love it's wonderful. Keep it going. Okay, so we as someone walking into this, is web form something that I should reasonably learn? No?
No.
Yeah.
Could, yes. Reasonably, possibly. But the thing is, it's not that it's not current. There's hundreds of companies out there, I'm sure, who are still using it now. It might be out of date. It may not be the current bleeding edge thing. But I tell you now, there's enough corporations out there which are still using it all the time.
But just to answer Alyssa's question, no. Do not learn web forms, Alyssa. No.
What about Winforms?
People say no, but I that was the first bit of C# I did was Winforms. So, but you don't need to learn web forms.
I think not. I wouldn't go anywhere near it. Not now. Unless you had a job where your company, you just imagine you got a new job and they're saying, oh, by the way, all that stuff that we told in the interview, you're not going to be doing that. No. We actually want you to maintain this old thing, and you get suckered into maintaining old applications. That's when you would learn it.
Oh, see, and this is like another thing that I don't really get. C# Fritz is saying that Winforms, yes, it's in .NET 6. What the crap is WebForms in? Like,
It's not.
it's in .NET 5? Like,
No,
what?
it's not. It's in Framework. Like Framework 4.67. Was that
So
what we
you
were
have
on
now
now?
hit upon something I have no.
Well, you
What?
see, I think Jim has slides.
I've got slides.
Oh,
We'll go there in a minute.
God.
Okay.
Thank God.
Right.
Because we've already talked about that. Okay, so like we are 2 web forms. We have .NET. .NET's a thing right now. So
Yes.
how is it not in .NET? Because it's after this point in history, right? Like we have.
I think we're
.NET,
getting mixed up. So
okay, I'm mixed up.
that's
Mhm.
right. .NET 2002 onwards, .NET all the way through to now. At the beginning, there was WinForms, which is for your Windows desktop development, and then there was ASP.NET, which allowed us to make web forms. But they've been a thing all the way from the beginning. So
Where was Classic?
Classic, let's not talk about that.
Okay.
It's one tangent too many.
Let's not talk about that. Okay.
I love it. Anytime someone
You've
says
got all
something,
evening, right? Yeah.
yeah. No, anytime someone says something like that, I'm like writing it down. Like, must find out what this classic
No,
business is, right?
I know all about Classic. That basically was the staple of my career for like 5-6 years, if not more. It's very different to all of this.
Oh, okay. Okay, but is it? So it's not considered .NET then, because it's like its own
No.
thing. Like it's
No,
okay.
no, there's a kind of precursor to .NET.
I'll show you some stuff on that, Alyssa, on another thing.
It was no UI. You see, like we'll look on the screen here, we can see like sort of like forms and buttons to drag across. There's none of that. It was a scripting engine, a scripting language.
Cool. Okay.
So you would have HTML markup with a little islands of Visual Basic code, and that code would do things like establish a database connection and maybe sort of pull some results back from a database server and display rows of table markup. But it's a very manual sort of way of making websites, and this is why web forms came to be, because they had all of these developers, really, thousands of developers doing Visual Basic 6, not so many doing this newfangled web development thing. But what they want to do is have all those army of developers making web applications using .NET. So that's why web forms came to be.
I love it. Okay, so don't learn web forms. What is after this point? Like, what happened? Because have we talked about you already talked about WinForms, right? Or no? Yes.
I touched on it. So
Right.
WinForms and web forms, both the same era, both the same moment they came out.
Okay.
So web forms was a way of making websites that looked like WinForms and looked like Visual Basic, but was still a website.
Okay.
There's still this expression going, isn't it?
No, I'm like I process slower than normal people. Like, it's known when I have a group of friends and we're all like hanging out and a joke is said, I literally 15-20 seconds I will laugh after everyone. It just
You're in good company here then. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about that.
I don't know what's wrong with my brain, but there's a heavy buffer. So it's not you. I'm just processing what you're saying. I think Raven was saying something similar. Web forms was invented in the same time and space when we had VB developers in the millions needed a place to build the next web applications. Web forms was the answer. Okay.
Yeah.
And it was clever. Mr. Fritz was spot on by saying, actually, it was good. The way they approached the problem was genius, really. But it was just made the web a very flabby, bloaty, slow way of making web applications. And it worked, but there's better ways of making websites. And that's where we move further down the line.
Oh, thank you, Fritz. I'm writing this down. So I have started my WPF journey, but apparently I need to reach out to Fierce Kittens for furthering it. I love that. I didn't know she was in that space.
I thought she did mostly Blazor. I had no idea either. That's really cool.
Right. Are we all right for time, by the way? Because there's lots to cover.
Well, next slide then.
Okay, let's move on. Right. So this is a slide that a lot of people in .NET will be kind of go, hey, wait, what's that? Because it's nothing to do with Microsoft. So let me set the story here. There's that thing there called Mono, the Mono framework, which was still .NET. And the thing with the Microsoft .NET framework is that it only worked on Windows. And there's developers out there who said, hey, we really like .NET and we really love C#, but it doesn't work on our Linux machines, on our Unix machines. So a group of people got together and said, let's make an open source project to kind of correct this wrong. And early 2000, I can't remember the exact dates, they announced it to the world. And in 2004, which you can see up there, this thing called Mono.NET was released. Now, if you're a Microsoft developer, completely entrenched in this Microsoft ecosystem, there's a really good chance that you hadn't even heard of this thing, right? It's just something like a little small subset of developers would be using. But for those that actually did work on Linux, this is their way to write programs using some sort of .NET. Let's not go down that path too much. Let's talk about Unity next. I was amazed that Unity is that old. If you'd asked me, I would have said maybe sort of like 2010s, that kind of time period. But Unity's been around since 2005. And you're probably kind of going, Jim, what's a game engine got to do with .NET? When you write your code in Unity, you're using .NET, but you're using that Mono.NET, and you write it all in C#. So you get that nice language that you're familiar with, and nice robust, does all the memory management, but inside of a game engine. So I thought that's worth mentioning because that's quite cool. So, and just to clarify, that doesn't mean that Unity itself was actually written in .NET. It was written in C++ just because it needs to be fast and performant. But from like a scripting language that you and I might write things in, that was all done in C#, right?
Was Mono C++ too?
What was that?
I see that Unity is written in C++. So
what was Mono written in? I suppose that's the same sort of question as what was .NET written in fundamentally. And I reckon it probably was C++. I don't know for a fact. Maybe chat can set it straight.
We've seen, you were rooting through for your random blog, Jim, and you were rooting through the source code on .NET, and you found it was C++, didn't you?
Oh, that's a good reminder. And there you go, Alyssa. You remember you were saying you don't always remember stuff? Here's a good example. I wrote a blog just a few weeks ago, and I've forgotten that already. So, yes. I mean, there's probably bits, probably like real low-level bits may even be written in assembly. I really don't know. I wouldn't speculate. But back then, it definitely wasn't. .NET wasn't written in C# itself. It is nowadays, but back then it wasn't. Right. Any questions, or should we move on?
I think I'm ready. I'm excited for the next bit.
Excellent. Right. So this is the world of .NET. So we got that released there in 2002. And then bit by bit, they started bringing out increments, new little changes, adding new features to the language. So the big thing here is that I've highlighted, oh dear, let me go back. Did you see that Silverlight? I knew we were going to talk about Silverlight. So that's my mouse wheel. C#2, C#3, look at the dates. You can kind of see how things were starting to come out every couple of years, adding new features to the language.
Numbers?
What? What's that?
It does, yeah. C# has numbers.
Why does it have I don't. You're upsetting me greatly. Okay. Hang on. What? It's just C#.
It's just C#.
Why are you giving numbers, Jim?
Oh, yeah, that thing.
Just it doesn't have numbers. Just ignore those numbers there, okay?
Is it really up to 10?
Yeah.
Wait, does .NET try to match?
No. So it's .NET 6, C# 10.
Alyssa, that's an excellent question, because Microsoft are very famous for being really kind of consistent with their naming and numbering conventions. So yeah, in the early days, it kind of did. .NET 3 was C# 3, and then give it like a couple of years, and Microsoft goes, oh, let's make up some new numbering system. So for example, you remember that Windows 9 that came out a couple of years ago?
Did you say Windows 9?
No.
I'm messing with you. I'm being a bad Jim.
And .NET 4, yes, that's it. Yeah, It's like Angular 3. Was there ever an Angular 3? No.
Oh, no, you're right. You're right. There wasn't. I mean, if you're being proper, you don't say it.
Huh?
What? Okay, so back in the day, did they say, I'm in C# 2. Are you in C# 3? Like, did they talk like that, or was that not? No, you don't know. I just didn't know if they ever said the numbers or if it was just always.
I don't remember talking about C# versions back at the time, but the actual .NET version was absolutely a thing. Because what would happen is it'd be a big deal. Every sort of like year or two, you get this big package from Microsoft, and it was a big deal that you had to install it on all your computers and your servers. It was, we definitely knew about the .NET version for sure.
Okay.
And then you've been talking about WPF, right? So there we go. 2007 is when that turned up. So it wasn't in the original .NET, but in .NET 3, that's when WPF turned up to the party.
So, but it's not still in .NET 3, right? Like it is? Wait, what?
Everything that's in there, .NET builds up. They keep adding more and more toys into the bucket. So it was introduced in .NET 3, but it's been there ever since.
Right. So like if I make when I made my new WPF app, it's not using .NET 3 right now.
No.
Okay.
That's just when it first was released. So like the feature first came out, and then they keep upgrading it as it goes along.
And then WCF, I've never heard that one mentioned. What is that? Is that for desktop apps?
That's more of a server thing. So that was for about making network APIs. So hey, you're accustomed to making REST APIs in JavaScript now, aren't you?
Yeah.
In Node, I guess. So
Yes.
if you get posts, all that kind of stuff, it's kind of related to there. That's probably the easiest way to describe it.
Wait, so if I need to do like API calls in my WPF app, am I going to use WCF or no? Maybe.
You might consume a WCF service off a Windows server.
Okay.
Except you probably wouldn't be using JSON. You'd be using XML and SOAP. Have you heard of SOAP? Simple Object Application Protocol.
Yeah,
that's the thing.
Oh my goodness, that deserves a round of applause because you actually remembered something.
Who are you? I recognise your voice,
Layla?
I think.
Layla, are you being mean?
No, that's really quite impressive because
Alyssa, she's picking on me.
She does that.
The only thing that Jim's memory is super remarkable about
is my name.
Is movie trivia.
You're good at movie trivia. Jim, did you know that me and my husband can rewatch movies probably like 8 months after I've seen it, and it's a whole new movie to me. It just washes away. Layla was talking about how her brain, when she's learning new languages, forgets old languages. Mine just dumps randomly. Like it doesn't fill up. It just empties, right?
That's life, right?
So I love that you're great at movie trivia. That's a skill my brain doesn't have.
But at the expense of everything else. Sort of random actors' names from the 80s. Yeah, I'm your man. Try and ask me what I was doing like last week. No idea.
So if you need Jim to find soap, okay. What Ed was saying, Jim defines soap. Now it's Layla's birthday.
No, I'm not going to go there. Ed, I know what you're doing. He's messing with us.
Yeah, he's stirring the pot right there.
I think I'm being techno trolled.
So, if you need to do to create a data service, do you still use your MITs to reach for WCF, or is there something that came out after 2007 that is cool and you're have to use that?
I think WCF's quite cool if you just imagine you had a desktop application. Maybe you've made it in WPF, with XAML. It's quite nice that you can connect it to a WCF service, and it will give you things like a list of all the methods. So if you wanted to, I don't know, get customer method, it would list it all for you. So it's quite cool how it can connect. But would you use it in a modern web application? Probably not so much nowadays. I think you're more likely to use just normal sort of RESTful APIs with JSON.
Okay.
Does that answer the question? I'm not sure. Did I? I may have just said words.
Absolutely. No.
Right, let's move on, shall we? So we got to 2007 and C#3 with .NET 3. I want to throw this guy into the mix because everyone has to talk about Silverlight at some point. So I've called it Microsoft Flash there because I think that'll probably make much more sense if you've used Adobe Flash. I mean, did you ever sort of play Flash games back in the day?
Yeah. So when I went to school for web dev, the first, I get a little confused with terminology. The first language I used was Flash, but I wasn't using a GUI. I was writing something. What was
Yeah.
it called,
Action
Turtle?
script. 'cause
Action
that was-
Action script! Action script!
It was the first programming language I ever did. Was
Me
Action
too!
Script
Oh
with
my God,
Flash. High fives!
So yeah,
Was that
no,
screams of happiness then, by the way, or just like terror of all the emergent memory?
it was fun. I built things with it. I don't know. What's to hate?
I made a cool Halloween invite to send to friends for a Halloween party, and I had like bats flying out of a haunted castle and everything. It was epic.
I tell you what, though, you could just do stuff and it worked, right?
I mean, it was fine. I think they so we were looped in with game devs at the time, like early on in the course. And so they had thought to themselves, what is a language that can both work to teach web programmers and game programmers just basic function, like how things work. And so that's where ActionScript came into the mix. After that, of course, I learned JavaScript, but that was my very first one. So that's when people say Flash, that's what my brain goes back to, is using ActionScript. But maybe you mean something different.
No, exactly the same sort of thing. So with Adobe Flash, it was using ActionScript, and it was powerful stuff. You could think about all the graphics you could do, or excuse me, all the games that you could play. It was ace, wasn't it? So Microsoft said, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we could have something similar to that? Why don't we have our own browser plugin that works in lots of different browsers? And that's what Silverlight was all about. So the difference with Silverlight is that it was written using C# and .NET languages, just like we have been all along.
Okay.
It was the layout was used with XAML, just like you've been learning with WCF, and all of that worked in most web browsers, and it was really good. You know, whatever people say about it, Silverlight was awesome. You could do so much with it. Oh, Lyle, should we talk about that application now? Is that a good moment to talk about a certain dressage application?
We can do that. And no, I don't think Flash allowed you to write in C# at all. I did ActionScript, and yeah, that was JavaScripty stuff. Yes, we can talk about a specific application that Jim
Alyssa,
spent life writing.
do you want to hear Layla sounding posh on the internet?
Always.
All right.
Have you shared your audio?
No, I'm not going to do it on here. Listen,
I'll
have you got
find
access to a browser and have it all wired in with the sound?
I can. Yes, I can do such things.
Let's make it so.
Come on, then.
So in the private chat, if you send me a link,
Right,
I can actually click it. For
let's
some
see.
reason, well, not for some reason, it's very obvious why I can't click on links. Like if chat sends me links, I have to type it in manually. But in private chat, I can actually click on those suckers.
Now,
So
if I do it, will I break my slides?
Here,
you'll
I'll
see
do it.
now.
I'll do
You
it.
can do it.
Yeah, if I can. Yeah.
So while Layla's digging out that link,
You keep going.
one of the cool things about Silverlight was that a browser, if you've got this thing running in different browsers, they work on different platforms, right? Different operating systems. It works on Mac, on Linux. So Microsoft had to write code which was cross-platform. And that was kind of a first for them, because up until this point, .NET that Microsoft had created had only been on Windows. So you almost took it for granted that it worked on all these things, but they got .NET working on Mac, on Linux, and so forth. And that's really quite clever stuff. And they managed to all shoehorn it into a browser plugin. So it was pretty amazing at the time. But how are you getting on, Lau? Keep going?
I've got it. I just will it automatically share sound?
okay, so when you click share,
Yeah.
you have to do there's a little audio, like share audio box on the bottom, and I think it only happens if you choose to share a window. Yeah.
Okay.
And
All right.
I reckon fast forward about halfway through, probably
Okay.
we'll get to the meat of it pretty quickly. So, Lau, do you want to explain what we're all looking at?
All right. So, for those of you who don't know, I used to be a professional dressage rider, which is like dancing with horses. And so Jim built a thing for building out the routines that you did, and you did it in Silverlight, and people could go and subscribe, like set up an account with it, and build out their dressage routines. So you'd make your own if you wanted to do dressage to music. So this was the app that Jim built, and I did the voiceover for the YouTube video. So I'll press play.
As a selection in the action type pull down. In the text box labeled single point,
Hey, you sound the same.
X. As before, once the sequence is validated, the red border will disappear and the content will be drawn on the diagram. In this
But this was in a web browser, right?
speech bubble appear on the diagram. Adding a new movement. Next we will create a new movement, earlier, i.e. click in the space underneath.
Yeah, just scrub back and forth, just get some more interesting looking
Right,
diagram.
Yeah, I'm going to find it. And then you could step through, like, oh yeah, you drew, like, I remember this taking you ages. Is it going to come? Is it coming? Come on.
Come on, YouTube.
Like, we have excellent internet. What is going on?
No, it's probably that video's gone to sleep on YouTube servers.
Oh, look at that. Did you see?
Scroll the left-hand panel down to see it.
The animation.
This is so cool.
Text with your
What? So what year was this?
This was 9 years ago. The video was uploaded. So like 2000. Well, I think you actually did this.
I think I did
to
it over
Spain.
2011. No, I did it when we came back. I did this over the course of the year of 2011, I think. And this video was early 2012.
Ah, puppy.
Or banging. I don't know what's going on downstairs or next door.
This is useful to know as it means insert sequences or even movements.
But yeah, that
But
was
look
it.
at that though. It's sort of 3D graphics and sort of like really rich UI things.
So this was all Silverlight?
That's right, yeah.
Okay.
All within a web browser. It's mad. It's really clever, wasn't it? Anyway, you can see the comments on the slide there. iPad in particular turned up about the same sort of time, just a little bit after. And Steve Jobs said, right, okay, we're not going to have any of these browser plugins working on Mac platforms. Now, people speculate that he was getting his own back on Adobe because apparently, I think it was 98 or 99, Jobs had asked Adobe to make Photoshop for Mac. And they, I might be wrong with my dates, and they said, oh, no, we're not going to do that. So he wasn't one to carry a grudge, no, nothing like that. But when he, fast forward a decade, he said, right, okay, we're not going to have Adobe products in our web browsers. So anyhow, the Adobe plugins were just banned. They were not allowed to carry on. And pretty much overnight, Flash
So
was
I
killed.
was told from a web Mac life, like from those type of people who have been always responsible for my training and teaching up until now, that he made that decision because it was what was best for the web.
Oh yeah, that was it. Yeah, I was just mistaken. Yeah. It's performance
I
and
don't know.
security
I
reasons.
literally don't know if that was. And every time I was like, but why did he do such things? Because
No,
it was best.
No, the official line was that it was cripplingly slow for their products. And to be honest, there was probably a lot of truth in there. And as it's still applicable up until very recently, it's a bit of a security risk because you had such access to the underlying operating system. People could put nefarious stuff in there and hack your computer. So, yeah, it's been pulled. It's been pulled from all the popular browsers now. But the thing is, that killing off process started all the way back then in the late 2009, 2010 type era. Or Ed's comments, yeah.
Deep breath, yep. And then Fuel saying Steve only did things that were best for humanity. That right there. That's the line that I was always told. So y'all can laugh, but that's the school of thought that was trickled down to me. So
Silverlight pretty much, Microsoft didn't cancel it, but they just went quiet. Wouldn't answer any questions, wouldn't say what the future it was, and bit by bit it just died on the vine, right? But anyway, the important thing is that they made that the runtime cross-platform code, and that would then sort of ripple forward into the current state of affairs. Right, let's go forward a slide. Let's try that again. Let's go forward a slide. Oh, come on, computer. There we go. Right, you saw that, right?
It was like, you mean 12 slides? No, I didn't mean 12 slides.
It's obviously I've got shakes, and it went like 5. Did I just go forward 1 then? Let me go back to make sure. There we go. That's right. Yeah. So a couple of important landmarks to pick out there. Obviously, there's a bunch of .NET versions came out. So you were saying, oh, there's more than one .NET. They keep on coming. And something else I wanted to pull out there was that MVC. So have you heard of MVC, Alyssa?
I mean, model view controller, yeah, like it's all over the place.
Yeah.
But like ASP.NET.
In this context,
Why is there an ASP before it? Where did our
Active
numbering
service
system go?
pages. So this is like just the web part of .NET.
Do you want to talk about this, Layla? Because it's getting into your sort of real sort of territory of stuff you really know about.
This is your presentation.
I don't mind tape actually.
Hi Jens. So you've got .NET, so you were doing stuff, well, you know, there's everything Windows presentation foundation, that's all done on that's desktop. So how do you differentiate stuff that was web based? And that was ASP. Remember, it was classic ASP. So ASP is for active server pages.
Yep.
So where it serves up data rather than just being a static site. So in comes MVC, which is a design pattern, and this was coming in to replace, or not replace, maybe it was to replace,
Improve
upon web forms. So as we said with web forms, everything was munged together. You had that view state like at the bottom of the page. To manage the view state, you had like this like string of stuff at the bottom of the page, and it got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and that's why they were like in the page that was transmitted. So that's why it was bloated and slow. You had all this crap at the bottom of your web form. So bring in MVC, and this is real separation of concerns. You have your view, you've got models that pass data back and forth to the view, and then you've got your controller. So you've got the back end, and then you've got what's being served to the viewer and to the user in your view, and then you've got the data being sent back and forth. So you now got the server kind of maintaining it rather than all of this, and it's just a much nicer pattern to work with because you can separate your logic in a much more logical fashion. So I started by learning MVC. I didn't touch web forms, and I still love MVC. And Ed, just
you say that like others don't love it.
Oh no, Ed, close your ears, because everyone's like on the Blazor train, or they like Razor pages, or they're off doing Angular and this and that. If I want to prototype something really cool, and if Napalm was still in the chat, he would have said this to me as well, because he sent me a Discord message earlier saying how he just did this application, and he's like, yeah, I just did the front end in MVC, and it was like boom, 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 because that's so familiar. And MVC is just,
I guess I thought it was like a pattern methodology that could be used with anything. Like you can do MVC in Blazor. Yep. So like it's weird that you're saying the things that you're saying.
It can be, but the way that ASP.NET MVC was like convention based, and it really embraced the pattern. And so because there was this really strong convention-based implementation of MVC, you know exactly how to build things really quickly. With things like Blazor, I find it ambiguous sometimes about what should be where, and like what happens in this bit, and what
Ed is going to ban you, Layla. You realise that, don't you?
Ban me.
But what if, like, so if you're not, like, let's say you're like, okay, I'm going to do this with ASP.NET MVC. I'm not going to use Blazor. What are you using instead of Blazor? So
you have the view. So this is like a CS HTML. It's HTML with code in it. So it would look, it's like a templating. It's Razor. So it would look like Angular or React or something like that. So HTML with @ symbols in it. And you could have code blocks in this. So you could actually put C# code blocks in there. You might put them in amongst the HTML, or you might put them in a block at the bottom. It allowed you to have partial pages. So like you would have a component in Angular, you could embed components in a master layout. So you could really separate things, and there was a lot more reusability.
It sounds like this would be like the meta. Like, did everybody love this when it came out?
People liked web forms, I think, still.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Yeah. It's
I was like,
familiar.
Everything describing sounds like, yeah, like that's
it is great. And that's
Okay.
why MVC is still there, that you can still do MVC. And it's, but the difference is that it's chatty. You can, if you use JavaScript, you can load, you can make an AJAX request to an API, but you can just bring some data and update your view. You can update the DOM manually like that. But traditionally, everything would be a page reload. It would be a full, you'd go, you navigate somewhere and it'd be a page load. You'd get the entire page sent from the server. So there's this coupling between the server and what the user sees. So that's why, so it's quite a load on the server because nothing really is done in the browser. And with Blazor, if you're using Blazor WASM or if you've got React or Angular, you're offloading a lot of the labor to the browser. So your server doesn't have to do so much. So that's kind of the difference thing. Have I missed anything, Jim?
No. What I would say is that let's underline the fact that there's no wrong way. It's like everything in programming. These are just lots of different ways to make applications, lots of different ways to make, in this case, web applications. And there's no point saying, oh, web form's old, it's the wrong way of doing things. It's not. It's completely relevant. It was brilliant at its time, but things change, right? Why do you get different JavaScript frameworks come through every... We're up to about eight frameworks now, aren't we?
You're such a troll.
JavaScript, you're like, there's a band, that Silicon Orchid character. He's a loser. Don't want to listen to him. But you know what I mean? It's like, just because something's replaced, it doesn't mean all those old JavaScript frameworks are redundant. It's just like, where's the critical mass? Where are all the people? Where are all the developers mostly focusing their attention? And if you listen to social media, you probably would believe that everyone's doing the latest stuff. But like we were talking about beforehand, you've got all these dark matter developers who are probably using much, much, much older tech. Who knows? Who knows what people are using? You like what you know, right?
That's good points. No, and I love it. There really isn't good and bad. And I think the old head of the Angular team said it beautifully when someone was like he was on stage. It was like a 2,000 person developer audience, and someone asked a question, and they were essentially getting at, what are we going to do about React? It's coming for us all. And this was early days. And Brad Green was like, yeah, I don't really care. Let it come. He was like, I don't make a penny more or less if you choose to use React. So if it works for you, use it. And I was just like, because the people want this polarizing response. And the head of the Angular team was like, go use it. so I think I love that, how you put that. I really
I'm just looking at
it's funny because if you try to use, let's say I was like, I'm going to use ASP.NET MVC, people are going to come out of the woodwork and be like, oh, I can't believe you're doing that to your life.
Completely. I just saw a comment in chat from Phil Schnabel, who was talking, is that how you pronounce it? Slap my wrist if I got it wrong. Schnabel. Talk about F#, and yeah, he's absolutely right. Well, they're absolutely right. I've not mentioned F#. So they're saying it came out in Visual 2010. I think that's about right, because I remember about 2009. So I think that all kind of dovetails. So Alyssa, remember we're saying that .NET supports C# and Visual Basic, and they all kind of compile down to the same intermediate language. F# is yet another language that people can write their applications in, just in case you weren't confused enough.
But
what else can we bring in
still be considered .NET developers?
Yes.
Yeah, F#
absolutely.
F# is a very vocal community that we love, and F# is absolutely in .NET. You see now, you've made some enemies now, Jim, by not having F# in this. Because
I know.
Always forgetting the F#.
I was very remiss.
So we have. Let me see if I get this straight. So we've got C#.
Yes.
And then on the same level is VB and F#. They're actually all the same level. Yes? No. Okay, cool. And you can be a .NET developer with those.
Yeah, and you can have in one application, you can have F# and C# code in the same application. I don't know if you can have VB in the same application, but I know you can have C# and F#.
But Alyssa, you're probably going, why?
Is that just because someone comes along and they're like, I want to do it with this, and then they make their part of the app with that, and it just like all works together, like,
Well,
or compiles
the
down?
VB bit we've covered. That's legacy because this all started in Visual Basic, so it made sense to carry that through. The F# bit is an interesting question because that's a functional language.
Yeah.
I'm not really up on my F#, so you have to excuse me for not being right. But it's much more the sort of thing that'd be more appropriate for data processing and analytics.
It's fast, really
fast.
fast.
It's all about sort of piping data from one function to the next and next, as opposed to doing C#, which is about object orientated and making objects out of things. It's a different way of thinking.
I think it's probably the difference between React and Angular. So I think of Angular being very object oriented, whereas React is much more functional. And F# is really functional, and it blows my mind. I've done workshops. You and I will do a workshop, Alyssa. I'll show you the workshop I've done and see if you get it more than I do. I look at it and I don't understand.
It's
how
really hard for
anything
me
works.
because anything I've ever learned is like that object oriented mindset. So like,
Yeah.
like I don't know, like it's just this bizarre paradigm that I don't really understand because
That's my problem with it.
Yeah.
I want to relate everything to an object.
I'm exactly the same. I struggled. I went on the course as well, and I got it. I could follow the examples, but could I make it gel in my head? Not really. Could I see myself using it? Probably not. I think I'd need to have a better use case to really want to sort of put the effort into going there. But I'm not
when
dissing
you
it.
talk about it being faster, and I'm like gonna upset some people, I cannot imagine a scenario where C# is not fast enough.
I think
Later,
maybe faster
maybe.
development for certain uses.
Maybe, yeah.
Because
Oh,
at the
you're
end of the
talking
day,
about on the like you're talking about on the writing code side, not on the
Yeah.
running code side.
because this still compiles down to that intermediate language, right? That MSIL. I saw Ed
Yeah,
put a
so
comment
that I
in
saw
there.
said that, and I'm like, what the heck is muzzle?
Oh, you covered this with Layla last
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, well, we talked about. Is this like with the drop down and the IIS?
No, that's
something?
IIS. That's the server that serves up your web app. This is the intermediate language. Intermediate or intermediary? The intermediate language. So this is what everything like C# and F# and all of those compiled to this intermediate language, and then that will go down to machine and something that it's still readable though.
Okay, well, cool. There is always like during these shows, there is always someone in chat who's like F#, and I'm always like, what? So it's good to know where that falls into place with all of this.
Data sciences and machine learning. That's kind of the places where you find it popular. But I'm not really up to speed with that, so I can't be authoritative and tell you too much about that. But it's a proper thing. It deserves all the respect. It's just not my thing. It's not Layla's thing.
Yeah,
but it
makes
is a
my
thing.
brain hurt. It's me. It's not F#. It's my brain. I'm a visual person. Okay. I need to visualize what I'm doing, and that's what object-oriented programming does for me. If people explain something to me without showing me something, I'm like you, Alyssa, it takes me a while to process the words.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, I think I'm following. Can I draw a picture? Could you draw a picture? Could you show me something? Can I draw some stickmen?
Someone open paint. Yeah.
Yeah, that's where I am. And I'm like, and when I come to functional, I'm like, that's it. That's what happens.
So I see that you say .NET 4.8 in 2019.
Excellent observation. Yes. Right. So earlier on, you were saying about the .NET versions. You're like, hey, there's .NET 2 and 3. Yep. So those .NET versions carried on nice and sensibly, logically until version 4. And then, do you remember I was saying that Microsoft are a bit funky with their numbering, with their version numbering? Well, this is where it starts to come out. So we'd had .NET 2 aligned with C# 2, .NET 3 aligned with blah, blah, blah. When it got to .NET 4, Microsoft kind of lost the plot bit with numbering, and I actually don't understand why they did this, but who knows? But the short story of it is that they had like incremental. Oh dear, I've gone back. Incremental versions there. You can see like C# 5 came out in 2012. The last version of the .NET framework came out in 2019, fairly recently. Is this a good time to talk about the differences between .NET Framework and .NET Core, Layla?
I think it would be a very good point to talk about it.
Okay, so everything I've shown you so far to do with Microsoft.NET has been something called the .NET Framework. And the gist behind that is that we have a runtime that you install onto your computer or onto your server. And depending on the version of that runtime, that depends what version of C# you can use. That's maybe a simplistic way of looking at it. When we got to .NET Core, all the numbering went out the window. We'll come to that in a minute, but what I wanted to just stress is that we've been talking about this thing called .NET Framework. So the naming is quite important there. And the last version of that was 4.8.
Okay.
All good? Cool. And yeah, there's a link there if anyone wants to sort of find out a little bit more information about what's going on. Are you ready to move forward?
Yeah.
Let's do it. Right. Xamarin. You've heard about this, yeah?
Yes, for mobile?
Yes, absolutely. So Xamarin was a company originally, so founded back in 2011. And that came from the same folks that did Mono. Do you remember that .NET Mono that we talked about sort of 20 minutes ago? So
20 minutes ago.
How many? How long? How long ago?
I don't know.
Like an hour.
It feels like ages, doesn't it? I know.
Anyway,
I love
carry
it.
on.
Yeah.
If you're bored or want to change subject, that's cool.
Keep
All right.
going.
So they acquired.
Right.
Wait.
No. So remember I was saying Mono worked on not just Windows, but worked on Linux as well. Well,
Yeah.
when you start getting to mobile phones, that's kind of important because they have like Mac phone is like another Linux type derivative. Mac OS, so iOS. That's what I'm trying to say. That's kind of a Linux derivative. Android, that's kind of another Linux derivative. So you want .NET to work on a mobile phone, it needs to be on Mono because up until that point, Microsoft had never touched sort of other platforms. So 2011, so we're going back in a decade. So, and Xamarin had been busy making this platform for allowing us to write native applications for our smartphone using .NET and C#. So they've been busy chugging away there in the background. And then a little bit more recently, Microsoft acquired Xamarin. So Xamarin is very now much a part of like that Visual Studio suite of tools. But it's important to just mention that Mono's been there in the background all along as this cross-platform implementation of .NET, and it's always this like little nagging voice to Microsoft that they probably need to be thinking about making their platform cross-platform to support people on Mac and Linux. Right, let's move forward again. Behold, .NET Core.
What is that? A cow in space? What's happening?
Oh, Lel can explain that.
Why is there a cow?
that's our mascot from our .NET users group, and we snuck him in because he's cute.
I love him. But the both of them are the space buds.
The robot is .NET's mascot, and so we have a cow in Milton Keynes. Everything about Milton Keynes is centered around cows.
Okay, I love it.
Because Milton Keynes is like a master planned city. It was built in the 60s, or started to be built in the 60s. It's all on a grid system, and so in the 60s, they put in some art installations.
Well,
and in
can I just interrupt?
Yeah,
Milton Keynes is important to us because that's where we live. For all the viewers who don't know.
Yeah. And basically, Milton Keynes is known throughout the UK for roundabouts and concrete cows. So we had a herd of concrete cows, and we still got them. We still got they're not the originals. They're in the museum now, but we have got some replica concrete cows of the concrete
if you're wondering,
cows.
It's an art installation. That's why we've got them.
Yeah. So like you can get these little mini concrete cows as gifts if you come and visit Milton Keynes.
Oh my God, I love it.
Mini concrete cows.
I love it so much.
So I designed our mascot for our user group to be a cow in the .NET spacesuit. So
I love that.
And I'm glad that we snuck it in.
Does the .NET sphere have a name?
The .NET bot? No, I don't think it does have a name.
Don't think so,
it's
no.
just the
He's
.NET
a
bot.
Okay.
Yeah, just .NET Bot.
Full Schnabel's going Milton Keynes. Quickly, that's a city which is about 50 miles northwest of London. So I'm sure you know where London is.
What I see .NET Core 1 is to 2016. Was that when the last version of .NET Framework was released as well? What was that year?
Good spot. Excellent spot. So this is where we start to get the world of .NET starts to diverge. So .NET Framework carried on. They kept on adding more features to it, improving on the language. And they did that to keep supporting all that legacy of existing developers who are creating all the applications using normal .NET. .NET Core. Have you ever had the discussion about what .NET Core is yet, Alyssa?
It's been brought up often, but it's not really sticking as far as its difference between framework
Cool.
and its place in the world. Other than people love the word core and they love to slap it on things, the same as forms.
But .NET Core was, Microsoft got to that point where we kind of went, hey, we need to make .NET work on lots of different computers, on Linux, on Mac, and really we need to start streamlining it because it's over the years it's got so big and flabby. We need to sort our stuff out. I think that was the gist of it. So back in sort of like the mid noughties, they said, so no, the mid 2010s, they said, come, let's sort this out. Let's rewrite this, and they went and recreated and rewrote .NET from the ground up. Now, I believe some of that code came from Silverlight. Do you remember I was saying there was some cross-platform code that works on? I think some of this, I was trying to ask Richard Campbell about this yesterday on Twitter, and I didn't get a reply back from him. But I think there's lineage from that cross-platform code which came all the way into .NET Core.
Okay.
So .NET Core version 1, 2016, that was kind of a cut-down version. It's like a minimal viable product of the new version of .NET. But it worked, and it could build on Mac, and it was quite the change. And the other thing is that it was properly open source.
Oh,
what was that?
The other one wasn't? Wait, what now?
Yeah, no, I was just like interjecting that it was open source, which was the big woo.
Yeah.
The .NET Framework is not open source?
No.
What
I
does that
think it
mean?
is now. No, it's not.
What does that mean to
No.
people?
I don't think it is.
No. I think
So you have
bits of it were.
So they pay to use it, or what? I don't.
No, I think it is open source. I think it's on GitHub. I'm sure I've seen sort of the C++ libraries for certain parts of .NET Framework, but they definitely made a point of saying, hey, going forward, we're going to be doing open source development.
Okay. And so, before 2016, we just had .NET, the framework.
Exactly.
If I'm using WPF today and I make a new app, am I using .NET Core?
Sort of.
Oh, come on now.
I could see where you're going with that question. I was like, oh, how do you answer this without kind of...
I mean, is it yes or no? Like, who am I using, right? Like, how can you sort of be... I'm confused.
It depends which version, what version of .NET you're using. Okay, Fritz has said yes. Yes, you are. You're using...
Definitely no, you are.
There, you're using Core.
Why is it a thing? Why is it not a yes? Okay, so, well, because like, we're just going to assume latest, right? Like the latest version of .NET. Like that's what people are choosing, right? Maybe that's a dumb assumption. But.
So we've got, this is it. I know Jim's going to go into this next. We've got two parallel branches of .NET right now. There you see, .NET Core grew up and became .NET 5. You see, yeah, but it brought other things in because we brought other stuff that couldn't run on .NET Core has come together. That's what I mean, mostly. But anyway, yes, Fritz has deemed it so that is it. So we've got parallel branches at the moment. We've got .NET Framework, Windows only, web forms, like Winforms, all that stuff, all that good stuff over here. And then we've got .NET Core over here, cross-platform, open source. This can't run on this and this can't run on that. Okay, so the new WPF should only be built on .NET 5 and later. So only, so that's it, Alyssa. There, your WPF only built on .NET 6. .NET 5 even.
But wait, what version are we on?
5, about I thought we were on 6.
Oh, wait, because Jim's last slide said, what was it, 4.5?
Oh, yeah, that's framework.
That one, okay.
4.8.
So
Yeah, that's what we're talking about. Is the
.NET framework. Yeah. This is it. The naming, Microsoft does confuse us all with the naming. You've got this .NET framework, you've got .NET Core, everything's .NET. It's difficult to follow. If you're a beginner coming into this, I can see you really scratching your head.
So what is the .NET framework up to right now, this very moment?
The .NET
Is it 4.8?
framework specifically stopped at 4.8.
It stopped at 4. Okay. And
Okay.
then .NET Core is, you said, on 5? No.
No.
Yes.
.NET Core was, think of it as being a parallel. So let me do it this way. So you've got .NET framework coming to version 4.8. .NET Core started about here and carried on. And then they said, hang on a minute, this is no good. We can't be having .NET Core and .NET framework. We need to bring it all back together again. And that's where .NET 5 comes in. Shall I go forward on the slide?
And here's another one now.
I think we may have gone too far too quickly with this concept. .NET 5 brings it all together. So if you're new coming into the .NET development world, you almost don't have to worry about the history of it. It's useful to know because it gives us all the context, right? But you come into it now, you just kind of go, there's one .NET.
Wait. So what everyone's talking about, the next version of .NET that's going to be released soon. What version is that?
That's 6.
That's 6. Okay.
In 2 weeks' time.
Okay, I understand. So that's how I'm creating a WPF app right now that is using .NET 5. Okay, because it's already out. I thought 5 was coming out, so I was like, how am I ahead of the times? Okay, I'm with you.
.NET 5 came out about this time last year.
Oh, are they trying to do a yearly thing?
Yes.
Pretty much, yeah.
Every November, and alternating years is going to be LTS versions. Every odd year will be a
long-term support.
Yeah.
So it's odd though. Napalm said they're dropping the core moniker. You don't have to care about that after 5. But you kind of do if you're supporting old stuff and right, like, and you're like, or like you're jumping onto a project that's like.
It's confusing, right? I'm completely with you, Alyssa.
I guess if you're like going forward, you don't have to worry about it. But if you're looking back, like there are these different branches of .NET.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're, say, a web developer creating data services, .NET Core 3 or 3.1 specifically is quite important to you because that's like a very sort of like line in the sand version of .NET Core. But moving forward, everything starts to sort of converge. From .NET Core, from .NET 5 onwards, you have C#9, is it? C8, 9?
Which one?
J-Stam,
I've put it on this slide for
it's worth noting that C# will be skipping from 8 to 10 because 7, 8, 9. What?
Oh, God.
What's that comment?
Is that real? I don't know.
I don't know. I don't think so.
So Fritz is saying something that's really interesting. He said that support for .NET Core disappears in 2022. Only .NET 6 will be supported as of mid 2022. But does that mean what about the thing that was before .NET Core? What about .NET Framework? Are you saying that's already lost its support? Like, what does support even mean? Because we're talking about the company that will support you for all time. So how can you say that?
What that means is that if they find a bug in the framework, for example, like a security problem, they will go back and rectify that bug. But what you're not going to get are newer versions of C# language in .NET Framework.
They are going to fix the bug?
They will. And they will do for many, many years to come.
Oh, I see. But they're going to like freeze it in time at that version of C#.
So it means you won't get new features, new bells and whistles, or new toys. But what you've got right now, and this is important as the enterprise developer, right? Because if you're going to sort of say, I'm going to put tens of thousands, possibly even millions of dollars of investment into your software, you need to know that it's going to be supported by Microsoft maybe 15 years later, yeah? So yes, it'll be supported. It'll be like security patches, stability patches, maybe performance. Don't quote me on that.
And Fritz is just saying that .NET Framework is going to be currently supported through 2029. You see, so years and years ahead.
That literally makes no sense because Framework is older. It should be deprecated sooner.
so
Kill it
much
off.
of enterprise is still on framework.
And so much enterprise is not on core. Like, we're not stressed about that.
They're not on
No.
core. So
Okay.
much of enterprise. I literally was on a company meeting a couple of weeks ago with a huge global car manufacturer, and I was on a meeting with them at work, and they called me in. I'm the .NET person, remember, at work, and I go in and I'm like, okay, so I did some chatting with them, and I said, okay, what version of .NET are you on? They're like, we're on framework. I asked some questions, and they're like, oh yes, we've got Winforms app. I'm like, okay, they want to port it onto modern cloud. I get into the meeting with the actual developers. I'm like, okay, so tell me like about your applications. Well, we have over 500 applications on Classic ASP, and the rest, which is they had nearly 600 applications, are on Winforms. I was like, okay. So they just started talking about all the Classic applications. I was like, I may as well have been a doorstop in that meeting. I had zero use in there because it's nothing to do with .NET. But that's over 500 applications in this huge car manufacturer's suite.
What do you do for, because I'm assuming you don't take those applications and then upgrade them to .NET Core and then upgrade them to, like,
no.
Is it just a rewrite? Like, what do you do?
They lift and shift. So this is where they just literally take them off their, I don't know, in-house servers, and we're going to put them on like stuff in the cloud.
I'm sorry, what? You're just going to keep using them?
Yeah,
as
there's
is?
no point in updating them. And,
Well, I mean, the point is in 2029, they won't be supported anymore, right? Like, isn't that the point?
I don't even know how long Classic is being supported for, if it still is.
You're saying that Classic is different than Framework.
I don't know.
Is there a point, because we talk about this like, oh, support ends in this year, but people keep using things after support is happening. So like there is not a point. It's not like Silverlight where it was like does not work, right? Like, is there, with all of these different versions of .NET Framework and Core and Classic, is there a point that it's just like not going to work, or will we always be able to in some sort of fashion run
what
them?
Fritz said, so as .NET, so this is to do, but Classic isn't supported, so I don't know about Classic, but Classic is a little bit, it's not quite so intensive. I think it just kind of runs. You don't need so much stuff with it, I think. I don't know. I don't know much about Classic. But, Fritz is saying as long as .NET is on Windows, you can run the applications. Mm-hmm. So just because Microsoft won't support them doesn't mean, exactly what Jim just said, Fritz is confirming, you won't get new features. But, they'll keep it going. They'll keep it there to support these old apps, because the enterprise, they want to move at their own pace. And they have business critical features that they need to do in modern apps. But they probably just want, these might be internal apps for, I don't know, ordering new office furniture. Who knows? So they don't really need anything else to be added to it. They just need it to keep doing what it does, its internal tool, and they just need it to run cheaply somewhere. So I think that's what it is, but they don't want to invest any developer time on it, and that's why they need to keep them going. And they may not be.
It creates such a weird, like, niche pocket though in time, where it's like, okay, so we keep lifting and shifting these applications so that they can work in the future, but like it's so bizarre, because you think as a developer for that company, hey, I want to be .NET developer. I'm going to learn 6. I'm going to be up to date, but I also might have to go and, fix a bug on this Classic application. It's just a bizarre mindset. But it's very real. Like,
there's another issue there as well, though, Alyssa, because remember earlier in this discussion, I was saying, hey, we've got students coming out of college.
Yeah.
They were not even born when this technology was mainstream. So what are these companies going to do to find developers who can actually support it
and do this
properly? It's a problem.
Well, and Fuel's saying that this is what dark matter devs do. I need a paycheck to pay off my mortgage. Totally. But they're going to die out, right? Like, And are we still teaching classic?
Shouldn't think so.
I mean,
but-
I guess you can always teach yourself anything, but yeah, it's a very interesting, like 20, 30 years from now, what happens,
On the job learning is probably the answer to that. If you've
Mm.
got a company, as you said, you're going to have like these old dudes, developers like me, who did it when they started their careers, and possibly they'll get on a naive graduate and say, hey, this is how you do this thing called classic ASP. You really want to learn this. It's good for your career.
They'll spin any old, story
Mm.
to get people to do the stuff. I mean, I've gone for jobs here in Milton Keynes, and I'm like, and I'll go in and I'm like, yeah, I'm using .NET Core, and I've been doing this, because this was before I moved into DevRel. And they're like, yeah, but have you done web forms? And we have got some classic apps. And I'm like, no, right, we may as well end this conversation now. See ya, because they still want that.
Mm.
Yeah, no, and that totally makes sense. Oh, so from here on out, this is a really interesting timeline. 2023 .NET 8, it's so bizarre thinking like that far in the future. So, but after this next release, this is the one that melds core, yeah? Or it's already been melded?
It's been melded as of .NET 5.
5, okay.
So we lose that framework name, we lose the core name, it just becomes .NET. Until
Okay.
maybe about 5 years' time when Microsoft come up with some other sort of branding. But for now, this is the status quo, right? Yeah.
Burn. So this is everything now, and you just ignore that thing that says .NET Standard. That we're not even going to go there. I can see that there, and I know you had a slide.
Oh, that slide there. Oh, let's talk about it now, shall we?
Okay.
Do you want to talk about that now, Layla, do you think? Or is this just like information overload at this point?
Basically, Alyssa, you had these two, remember we had the two parallel branches, .NET Framework and .NET Core. For people writing libraries that needed to serve both. So imagine you think about your NuGet packages, so like your NPM, and you're a writer and you want to be able to release something that does something cool with HTTP for both branches. You had .NET Standard that would work on either. So if it used .NET Standard, it would work across everything. So it's like a little bridge. Oh, what? We are a monster for bringing this in, yeah.
do you know what? When I first heard of .NET Standard, I swore, because at that point we'd had .NET Framework, Microsoft recently just introduced .NET Core, and then they started to introduce this thing called .NET Standard. I was like, what? Yes, another? You're kidding me, right? Yeah. No, it's not that. It's this. What do they call it? A Venn diagram. It's the overlap between all those slightly different technologies. So the APIs that are part of .NET Framework and the APIs of .NET part of .NET Core, what's common between all those slightly different versions of .NET? And that's what .NET Standard is about.
It exists already?
Sadly.
It
Yeah.
did at the time that .NET Core was a thing.
So it's kind of gone now.
I'm sure .NET 5, it's like, don't worry about
No,
it.
I
It's
thought
just
you were
.NET
saying
5 now.
I thought you were saying it was like the future. So it's not.
Oh, no. This is old now.
I'm sorry, Alyssa. This was
Yeah.
supposed to be a straightforward,
other brains are
easy.
melting as well.
It's pretty easy ideas, and the more I've just talked about it, the more I realise, yeah, it's complex.
You would Fuel. You like F#.
Right, so that's where we are now. So next month, .NET 6.
So C# saying it still exists and it can be used to build libraries that work with both Framework and 5+. Okay.
So I think all this stuff about .NET Core and .NET Framework, it does get really confusing. But I think the thing I really wanted to get across was that why have we got forms? Why have we got Winforms? Why have we got web forms? Why do we even have Visual Basic? It's because of all that stuff in the late 90s. And I hope now you can sort of kind of get the gist of why we even bothered doing all that kind of stuff.
It's weird that you put UWP in that diagram though, because when Ed was teaching me about these different, I don't even know what you call them. Do you call these frameworks? Like when you talk about WPF, UWP, like Winforms, are those frameworks, languages? What are those called?
I never know what to call them. What are they called? That's a really good question. I just call them, that stuff, that bit of .NET.
That bit. We'll call them bits. So Ed was
bits.
teaching me about the bits, how they evolved, what they do, what their purpose is. And so I have this like little note that I took to myself on like, first there was Winforms, and then after that, I think it was WPF, and then after that was UWP, or is it UWP? Is that how it's? But nobody
Universal
liked
Windows.
So, but nobody
Apps.
liked
Yeah.
that one, so don't learn that one. Go back and learn WPF. And so that's like in my notes of like frowny face next to it. So it's really strange that you have this like diagram of like all of these frameworks, and that UW. Can you go back to that one with the circle?
This one back here, that one there. Yeah.
Why is UWP in this list? It's so strange, right? Like, if UWP makes this list, shouldn't WPF and Winforms and all the other bits?
Because didn't UWP replace WPF? You see, frameworks, when you use frameworks for it confuses it with .NET framework.
UWP is that universal Windows application. So do you remember back in Windows 8, they started pushing a thing called Metro, right? Does that ring a bell? Not to you, Alyssa. I know this will be new to you. But that eventually came like, but that came like universal Windows applications. So they're the things, you have like the Windows App Store. That's what you write, which fits into there.
Yeah, Fritz is backing you up. He said Metro and Windows 8.
Metro, yeah, that didn't last long as a name, did it?
Yeah, and WinPhone. That's a source subject for you as well, Jim. You've never backed the right horse, have you, with the Silverlight and then Windows Phone? You liked Metro a lot as well. You're stum now.
I've got a book somewhere for Metro, I'm sure. It's not very thick, though. But it's all about how you should design it, what the cosmetics should look like.
What tree of frameworks did Metro belong in?
Framework.
Was Metro pre-Xamarin? Was Metro pre-WPF? Was Metro like where does it?
It was like 2000.
Whenever Windows 8 came out, that's when that type of application came out. So this was part of Microsoft's cross-platform efforts, because Alyssa, I don't think you'll know this, but Leia, do you remember the original Surface, Microsoft Surface?
Yes.
Okay, so that was an ARM-based device. And that was a big deal because it seemed to run Windows on an ARM tablet type thing. But your regular Windows applications wouldn't work on this little tablet. So you had to have them written in a certain way, which is where these universal Windows applications came from.
This is
so many tangents, eh?
This is an original Surface.
Oh,
have you
Look
got
how
one
big
there,
it is. This is my Surface. The original.
That's a Surface Pro.
This is a Surface Pro.
Now, that's a different beast again, though, Layla, because that is an Intel system. So that's basically like a regular Windows computer.
This ran Windows 8 Pro, it says on the back here. So this one wasn't the cut down version that ran Metro. So yeah, but there you go. This is
so Metro is not a framework to build desktop apps in. It's a OS.
I think that's confusing. I think it was still Windows. It was called Windows RT. And that was a version of Windows which ran on those tablets. Metro was a way of describing what I think Windows used the semantics design language. Like nowadays, you've got like those tiles, those big squares down by the start button. That was a fairly new idea back with Windows 8. And that was, Microsoft put a lot of effort into trying to promote, hey, you should write applications that use this kind of tile-based system. So if you ever owned a Windows phone, back in 2012, I think it was, that had that same kind of tile-based UI, and that carried on for years, and it's still there in Windows 10 now, I guess, in a way.
Is it in Windows 11 though? I still haven't installed Windows 11 and upgraded to it yet, so I don't know if it's still
there. Fritz was saying that it was pre-UWP after WPF. So
it was a little bit in between.
Why do people hate UWP?
I don't know. I just know that it was like, don't bother with it. It sort of came up and it was like, no, we don't talk about that anymore.
I don't know. I've never seen the hate messages. You could say Does
Maybe it's in my head.
is it locked into the Windows ecosystem and people always a
Oh,
bit funny
Fritzy
about
is saying
Microsoft?
there's
Maybe?
politics. Okay.
Often
Ah.
politics.
And Fuel's saying that it was hard. The programming model was hard to understand.
I never developed for these
No.
type of applications, so I can't speak to it.
Okay. So I think I get now your diagram because these are the latest bits of each world. So it's like UWP is the latest one of that
Exactly.
tree. Xamarin is
Exactly,
the latest
yeah.
one of that tree. Okay.
And what's the common footprint? So if you were to write code that you wanted to have available on all these different application types, .NET Standard represented that bit in the middle that you could share across all these different platforms.
So, for example, let's just say string. Like you wanted the code that handled string. You'll use string everywhere and ints and stuff like that. So you kind of put them in this shared resource, which was .NET Standard. But
did it change anything, or was it literally just like this is these are the basic principles of programming that are the same between these, or did they have to change some of them to match?
They didn't have to change any, like as a developer, you didn't have to really worry about anything. It was more about how things got shared across all the different frameworks. Is that right?
I'd say it's more about having the things which were relevant for those different platforms. So, for example, if you were writing a .NET Core application, some of the APIs for Windows type applications or WPF type applications wouldn't be applicable. They wouldn't have even been implemented in .NET Core. So you couldn't write a WPF application using .NET Core. It's probably an easy way of saying that. But there's certain parts of it which would be common. So maybe sort of link. That's a good example of something that would be common.
I think I understand it. Someone earlier in chat was saying how I think of .NET Standard as a contract of APIs, a set of APIs you can target that will work in a given version of runtime. And so I do think that's pretty accurate. Like that seems like a good blanket statement to understand it.
Yeah.
But also for those moving forward or coming in late to the scene, not something to worry about, right? Like it's
going forward. So if you're only concerned with the new world and you're going to say, I'm going to pick up .NET 5 and not look to the past, don't worry about it. End of. .NET 5, there's one .NET, you don't have to worry about standard or different flavors. Just pick it up and run with it. If you have to support stuff from the past, which in the real world developers have to, then it becomes a consideration. But if you're in the position of like learning, you can't go, how do I get my head around all this stuff? How do I learn this? It's easy to get overwhelmed, for sure. For sure.
No, I loved this walkthrough, and it really did help clarify. There's a lot. There's so much. I could see how Campbell's talk is so long, and I mean we went on for 2 hours talking about this because it's just so rich. There's so much to it, and so I really, really appreciate you walking me through this and my silly questions.
Never silly. No, never silly. No.
Yeah, Fuel's saying, I wonder what we'll say 10 years from now. I feel you on that. I'm really curious, especially with as like the future of .NET continues to get further and further from things that from the frozen bubble of enterprise. Like I'm really curious to like what happens and how that looks. So yeah, right there with you.
My.
What?
There's a couple of takeaways. So it's knowing that stuff that's here in .NET now, which makes no sense. You kind of go, why have they done this? Why have they included it? It's because it's got this lineage to the past and to things which were really common back in the day, used by thousands, potentially hundreds of thousands of developers. That's why it's been dragged through to the present day practically. And there's all these different flavors that's of different technologies and different ways of doing things, which are still useful, still relevant. Lots of developers out there are using that as their day-to-day job. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's just trying to get your head around this whole gamut of different sort of technologies and skills. It's complicated. And if you're a newbie coming into trying to learn this, like you, Alyssa, it's a headache.
Well, it's not only the history that's complicated, right? That you're walking in on, but there's so many, as like Fritz was saying, the politics of that one. There's so many, stories with the community that you're like, did I miss something? Why are you all making faces at me? There's lots of, but I appreciate you getting me up to speed on this, and I really I loved it, and I think chat loved it too. They were going, "Cray, it's a headache." Yeah, yeah.
What I would
Chat's
say
saying
is, if
it's
you
a
ever get the
headache. He's been
opportunity to
around for
see,
20 years. Yeah,
if you get to see Richard Campbell doing this talk, go watch him. I mean, that guy's a
I know.
genius. It's
It sounds
such a
like a
good
book
talk.
I need to get. I'm excited. You said
I think
February-ish.
we all should. It'd be
Yeah.
such a good read. Such a good read.
So Layla, I know we had console app plans. What are you thinking? You want because I know you said we needed a good chunk of time, and I think as far as our stream goes, we only have an hour left before Ed has something today. Something. What does Ed do?
Right.
If he's around, you should tell me what you do because I know it's something his user group or something. So or no, his podcast with John. It's anyways, it all blurs. So yes, tell me, Layla, what you think we should do.
I need
pondering.
I need a snack.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like,
Where's the disembodied hand? Why hasn't it brought you a coffee and snack already?
because it's
Right.
like it's probably on strike. It's like, yeah, no one to play with. I need a snack. We can go and do stuff. I think there's some chocolate wafer things. I do napalm. Napalm sent me a photo of a Pittsburgh sandwich from Primanti's, and it will look like the most delicious, mouth-watering, amazing thing. And he's like, "I'm sorry, I can't send that to you." And I'm like,
What?
"Thanks for showing it to me."
Oh, really?
And I'm like, that's for you. That lovely sound effect for all of you out there. It's just me sucking back the drool.
That explains something for me though, because I saw you on your phone, and all of a sudden you started making that noise, and I thought you may have been having a stroke. I wasn't quite clear what's happening.
Yeah.
No, I need to get some more water too. I'm trying to think of what we should do. So yeah, it's Eat Sleep Code, his podcast, and it comes on in I think in 55 minutes.
At like 3 p.m. your time, yeah.
Yes, on the next hour. Yeah, 3 my time.
So you two, you're going to go do some .NET stuff now, some programming. Do you want to take a break or just dive to it?
I don't know. You need to feed the dogs.
I'm gonna go on a 2-minute break to just refill water, chat. And then Layla's gonna go grab food and she can rejoin us. And I think we're just gonna touch a little bit. I don't know how far into it we'll get.
We're just gonna have a little step around. What?
Shall I scoot then? I'll leave you two to it because you
go.
do this.
You go.
So,
thank you for everything. You're
thank
amazing.
you very much for having me. I'll see you everyone. See you, chat.
Let's see comments. What's chat doing? Yeah, Fuel saying classic app. So we just went through this history, and Jim's actually still sharing his screen. I can add it. I don't think it was the right one. No, not that one. Classic as in pre.NET framework, I believe, was the history. Oh yeah, I think he made it. I think you made it happen for me. Sorry, Jim. I just totally. I'm like, I'm gonna steal your screen. Everyone's like, he's still here. No, I'm sorry. He's not. He's not here. Oh, he's not sharing. I think you're muted.
No, there we are.
There you go.
There we go. I'm sort of here. I wasn't planning to be here, but that's okay too.
Jim, do you secretly have a classic app that you run and work on?
My secret special products are completely secret. No one knows about the dark stuff I do. Do I have a classic ASP website? No, I did work on that way later commercially than I feel I wanted to. The last time I touched classic ASP was to support something from, I think I did it in about 2012. I didn't make a new application. Someone just wanted something to be fiddled with, and because I happened to have done it back in the day, I was the man for that job. But it's not something I've worked on commercially since about, I don't know, 2005, 6 maybe.
Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. But I thought maybe you had a secret,
secret
classic
websites. I wouldn't be announcing that to the world, Alyssa, if I had secret websites.
All right, I'm letting you go for real. Bye. Okay, so yes, we are waiting on Layla. So she's going to show me around back to the basics with a console app, which I'm super excited about. This is kind of a multi-part series. So Layla's going to walk me through a bit of basics with console apps.